One of the things that I learned from watching the cooking channel on TV is not how to cook. Actually, I use my oven to keep my sweaters. Storage is such a problem. But what I did learn is that there is a real science and mathematics to good cooking. I learned that you have to know how to measure if you want to cook. So after reading today's gospel, I decided I would use some of the tools that I learned from the cooking station, and I discovered that 1 glass is 8 ounces. And I discovered that 1 gallon is 128 ounces. That means that there are 16 glasses in 1 gallon. Now, the gospel says that the stone jars held 30 gallons. So if you do the kitchen mathematics, you can figure out that 6 stone jars will produce 2,880 8-ounce glasses of good wine. Now, knowing that weddings were important events in the ancient Near East, to which entire villages were invited, not to mention families, friends, and even distant relatives. When you know that about weddings at the time of Jesus, you have to answer in your heart of hearts this faithful question. What do you think they did with 2,880 glasses of good wine at the wedding feast at Cana? They drank them. Brothers and sisters, what is the significance of the very first miracle in the Gospel of John? In order to answer that question, I think we have to put that question in context by asking ourselves, what was the first miracle in the Gospel of Matthew? It was the cure of a man with a virulent skin disease. What was the first miracle in the Gospel of Mark? It was the cure of a man with an unclean spirit. What was the first miracle in the Gospel of Luke? The cure of a demoniac. And yet, and this is where it gets interesting, and yet John's first miracle is not a cure. It is the multiplication of wine. Why not a cure of a sick person as John's first miracle? Weren't there any sick people in Cana? I'm sure there were. No, you see, friends, John is making a point with the first miracle of Jesus. John is saying something that we need to hear. Just like Jesus was making a point when he multiplied bread 6 times in Matthew chapter 14, again in Matthew chapter 15, in Mark 6, again in Mark 8, in Luke 9, and in John 6, 6 times Jesus multiplies bread. And just as all the gospel authors were making a point by telling that story over and over again, so is John making a powerful point when he provides us with the one and only account of the multiplication of wine. And what is the point? I think The point is this. Of course, we need bread, but we need wine too. We need to be practical, and we need to be imaginative. We need to pay the bills, and we need to go on vacation. We need to do the laundry, and we need to take a nap. We need to be down to earth, and we need to have big dreams. We need roots and wings. We need to work, and we need to play. Why is it, do you think, that so many of us have such a difficult time trying to embrace the joyful side of life? Why is it, do you think, that so many Catholic Christians are surprised, if not shocked, when the Pope has entitled his new book that the name of God is mercy, when most people thought the name of God was judgment? Why, at least up until the election of Francis, has the American Catholic Church been ruled by so many people who are more into power than they are into service? Now, I've explained the answer to these questions before, but on the outside chance that you were at St. Pillows that weekend, I'm going to tell you why. Why we have such a hard time enjoying our faith. It goes all the way back to the 17th century, and a rather unremarkable bishop named Jansen, who presided over a diocese in France. Jansen was a prolific writer, and the theme of his writing was always the same: that anything joyful is a sin. Dancing, a sin. Playing cards, a sin. Singing, a sin unless you sang in church. He was strident and strict. And according to his theology, which spread all over France and then to Ireland, all of his theology was that people, us, that we are unworthy sinners. Now, Bishop Jansen was condemned by the church and excommunicated. And yet, his philosophy, his life, his party pooper attitude spread through all of Europe and into Ireland. And when the potato famine struck in 1845 and the Irish people flocked to the northeast of the United States, you know who followed them? The priests, filled with Jansenism. Everything that was pleasurable was a sin. And that took over our church for just a couple hundred years. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not condoning if it feels good, do it. Nor am I suggesting on the Sunday that Jesus multiplies wine that we should abuse alcohol. No, what I'm not condoning, let me say that differently. What the gospel is not condoning is a joyless faith. Brothers and sisters, the Jesus who turned water into wine is the exact same Jesus who turns depression into hope, shame into self-respect, prejudice into justice, guilt into forgiveness. The Jesus of today's gospel is the Jesus who transforms grief into happiness, tears into laughter, and sadness into joy. Now, some of us have been given the gift of faith. And according to today's second reading, others have been given the gift of healing. Some, the gift of mighty deeds, while others have been given the gift of prophecy. There are those among us who have the gift of the discernment of spirits, and there are others who can speak tongues, and some who can interpret the tongues. But all of us, without any exception, all of us have been given the gift of joy. Now I'm going to tell you a little trick that homilists use when they're trying to make a point that may be difficult for people to digest. They always try to end by quoting a dead nun who became a saint. Because if you don't like what I say, I'll just say, well, take it up with St. Bridget. She's in heaven, if you get there. This is what the old girl said about Jesus who changed water into wine and sadness into joy. And I quote, "I would like to have the people of heaven in my own house, with vats of good cheer laid out for them. I would like to have the three Marys, their fame is so great. I would like to have people come from every corner of heaven. I would like them to be cheerful in their drinking. I would like to have Jesus sitting there among them. I would like to have a great lake of beer before the King of Kings. It's St. Bridget, not me. I would like to watch heaven's family drinking it throughout all eternity." If you read the Gospels, you'll notice that Jesus multiplied bread 6 times. And he multiplied wine once. Do you know what happens if you have too much bread? You'll choke. For the wine of life, we stand to pray.